to another edition of the Buzzer Beater. I am Troy Alexander, and today I'm going to just kick off this episode by talking about some of the things that I am most excited for the second half of the NBA season, followed by followed by a topic that I've been seeing kind of swirling around the Twitterverse and just all over NBA related platforms. And that is Chris Bosh slander, which has got to come to an end here eventually. But anyway, I'm going to kick this off right now. And the first thing, I'm going to talk about a few things that I'm excited for to start the second half of the NBA season. So the first thing would be the MVP race, because I feel like in the first half of the season, there was, I'd say there was probably two favorites in LeBron James and Joel Embiid. Now, with Anthony Davis going down for the Los Angeles Lakers, we all kind of thought that maybe this was either going to give LeBron the extra shot that he needs to officially solidify himself as the MVP favorite, or some of us thought that if he doesn't perform well in the stretch that Anthony Davis is out for, then this could decrease his odds in winning MVP. The way he's performed since AD going down is still great in terms of, how basketball is, right? But for us viewers that have been watching LeBron for a long time, the way he's played hasn't really lived up to what our standards are of him. He's played magnificent. I mean, he's almost averaging a triple-double in the span where AD has been out. But probably for his standards, and I'd say a lot of ours as fans, they probably haven't lived up to everything that we thought would be that case. That being said, I look over to Joel Embiid. I actually feel like, now I may get some flack for this, but I actually feel like Embiid has been the most valuable player since about a month and a half or so ago. I honestly feel like it goes Embiid, LeBron as 1 and 2. What Joel has done this year is crazy. He's got, their team, the 76ers team, finally makes sense. It's pretty insane what happens when you surround your best players with shooters, which the Sixers have never really had since Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid have been on the team together. So they make a few trades, they swap a few guys out, and they bring in Danny Green and Seth Curry, and two great shooters. Danny Green's a little inconsistent, but Seth Curry is killing it. He's having a phenomenal year from the arc this year. And Embiid and Simmons just have so much more space to navigate. And I love how Embiid's kind of bringing back that old, just dominant big man 5 into the NBA. And it's cool to see, because we really haven't seen a dude like that since, Dwight Howard was probably the last super physically dominant center, but he didn't really beat you on the offensive end. It was more so he impacted the game defensively with his defensive rebounding, his shot blocking, his ability to defend on the perimeter, his ability to switch onto different positions and guard them. But I'm more so going back to the Shaq era, early 2000s, dominant Shaq. Now, I'm not saying Embiid is Shaquille O'Neal, but I'm saying he kind of is Shaq-esque in the aspect that he's bringing back that dominant 5 case, right? So it's really cool to see that. I also see that Embiid hasn't taken as many threes as he's been taking, and he can knock a 3 down. It's just ideally you want him closer to the basket, because that's where Embiid is most impactful on both ends of the floor. And I also think Doc Rivers say what you want about Doc. Some people think he's a really good coach. Some people think he's a bad coach because of some of his losses in the playoffs. I think Doc's a good coach. I honestly think he's a tad bit overrated in my opinion. I would still say Doc's probably like a top 3 to 5 coach in the league. So either way you muster it up, he's still a pretty damn good coach. I think Doc's leadership has severely helped Embiid, and I also think Tobias Harris. People forget about him as that third guy on that team. Tobias Harris has really taken that next step, and he maybe even had a case to be an all-star this year. So a lot of things have just come together for the Sixers this year, and I think that's also a big part why Joel Embiid has kind of taken that next step. So I know I didn't dive too much into LeBron and what he needs to do to get that MVP. We've all been watching LeBron for so long, and I don't mean any disrespect to like Nikola Jokic or even James Harden, because James Harden has like really taken over the Nets as far as like just controlling the offense, especially since Durant's been out. So I put Jokic and even Damian Lillard in there. So it's no disrespect to those guys, but at the end of the day, I feel like this is really comes down to Joel Embiid and LeBron James. And it's going to be interesting because I feel like the MVP award is such a narrative award. Like I look at some of like the past winners, like, and people want to say that MVP is only for like successful winning teams. I mean, yes, for the most part, but like I really feel like it comes down to narrative for MVP. Like I look at like a few years back when Russell Westbrook won MVP. I'm pretty sure the Thunder were like the 7th or the 8th seed that year. And the reason Russell Westbrook won MVP is it was a simple narrative. Like Durant had left. They literally traded all their pieces away that like from the original OKC team that we all knew, which was Durant, Ibaka, and Westbrook, right? Westbrook was the last man standing. He ended up taking that team to the playoffs, and he was the first player since Oscar Robertson to average a triple-double in a season. They clearly weren't the best team. They were a bottom team in the playoffs, and he won MVP. And I just look at some other years, probably like 2008 when Kobe Bryant won it, rest in peace, brother. But I feel like there's a few years there that LeBron James could have won like earlier in his career. But the fact of the matter that Kobe had never won an MVP before, the league was like, okay, we got to give it to Kobe. Like, come on, there's no way this man does not have an MVP award. And then I look at 2011 with that first year, the big three in Miami came together, and Chris Bosh, Wade, and LeBron. I feel like a lot of people hated LeBron that year. And you can say that, the Bulls and Derrick Rose, they had a number 1 seed that year. They did. They beat the Heat. They swept the Heat in a regular season, but then got beat 4-1 in the playoffs. But the MVP does not count for the playoffs. It is a regular season award. And you could say that Rose was the best player in the league in the regular season that year. He may well have been, but LeBron had pretty damn good numbers that year as well. And like I said, we don't count the playoffs, but all games in the playoffs that year and the Eastern Conference Finals were very close, but the Heat did pull that series out in 6 and got to the finals. So, I believe the MVP award is a big narrative award. That being said, I feel like because of that, I think LeBron is going to win MVP in the second half of the season, not just because it's a narrative award, but I mean, I think he proved last year after Giannis Antetokounmpo won that second MVP back-to-back. I think a lot of people were some people did vote for LeBron, I know. So I think what LeBron proved in the bubble in Orlando, that he is the best player in the league. And that's kind of carried over to this year. And I mean, I feel like LeBron should probably have more than like 4 MVPs. And that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why he's going to win it. Because I think the league has realized that there's no way that LeBron should have only 4 MVPs. He should probably have 6 or 7 by this point. So I think LeBron's going to get that 5th MVP this year. And that's not to say that Embiid won't ever get one. I mean, he still very well may get it this year. But I just think LeBron is going to win that fifth MVP this year. But we'll see what happens. You know, Embiid is going to be out for the next 2 to 3 weeks with that knee sprain, I believe it is. And we'll have to see what the Lakers and LeBron do with Anthony Davis out. I still think Anthony's going to be out for like, I don't know. That Achilles seems a little more serious than they're letting on. So from a basketball standpoint, I really, really hope Davis is okay and the Lakers are at full strength for the playoffs. But that being said, I want to move on to the second thing I am most excited for in the second half of the season. That's the Brooklyn Nets, right? I just talked about James Harden a little bit, so I want to kind of get into a little more of the Brooklyn Nets. So they have really come together over the course of the last month. And I thought there would be sort of a learning curve, and there very well still might be when Durant comes back and then fitting Blake Griffin into that small ball five off the bench. So I still think there's going to be some chemistry issues. I mean, I believe they're like 8 games over 500 without Durant. So the supporting cast is there. People want to say, oh, they don't have much depth, but that may be true. But excuse me, you still have 2 of some of the best scorers to ever play this game in Kyrie Irving and James Harden. And Harden has absolutely taken over that team just as the ball handler, the facilitator, the scorer when they need to. Like, I look at the Brooklyn Nets, and it's like any given night, one of those guys can just give you 40. And it's like, that might not be enough sometimes, but you've still got 2 more guys that can give you 40. And like, I was looking up some numbers from about the past 10 years or so, and we're all talking about defense come playoff time. And it's true. You need to stop other teams from scoring in the playoffs. The game slows down, and you have to be able to get stops. So I'm going to get my phone out here, and I've got a few stats from Basketball Reference. And I looked at some of the teams that have won championships that haven't been necessarily dynamic defensive teams, but they pulled it out. So I look back at the 2015-2016 Cavaliers. Remember the team that beat the 73-9 Warriors? Well, and this is just defensive rating. I'm not going by what they held other teams to points per game wise. This is defensive rating. That year, the Cavaliers were 10th in defensive rating. But they had that switch where they just kind of flick the switch and they could be a great defensive team when they wanted to. Now, if you look at stats to analytics, and numbers may not point that out because they were 10th, but they really had the switch that they can flip. You know, they had, you can say what you want about Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving as defenders, but they did make up for it. And LeBron could be a great defender when he wanted to be. You had Iman Shumpert coming off the bench. So you had a few wing defenders, and I can't forget about J.R. Smith, who they said at the time they felt like was their best wing defender. But the fact of the matter is, I just remember that team in the finals. They made it really, really tough on Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. And they basically said, we're going to let Draymond Green beat us. And that's kind of what happened in Game 7 that year. Draymond had like 28 points. He was on fire, but they let that happen. So I don't want to go too deep into that finals, but that was kind of their game plan, I believe. And they were the champions that year. And then the last team that, if you watched with the naked eye, you wouldn't really think was a great defensive team, but the 2013-2014 Spurs, that year right after they lost that tragic 7-game series to the Heat, they came back, had the best record in the league that year, and they actually were 3rd in defensive rating. Now, when I first saw that, I was like, wow, like I didn't think that they were that good defensively, but I just think that extra added motivation from losing the year prior really, really helped them. And Kawhi Leonard just developing into a pretty much superstar at that point, and pretty much catapulting like the Spurs, getting them over the hump to beat the Heat. But as far as that, I mean, I looked at some of the other, like I thought of the other teams, like the 2011 Mavericks, who had a defensive anchor in Tyson Chandler. They had a lot of nice wing defenders. And then I look at the Heat for those 4 years, a defensive juggernaut, pretty much. And then the Warriors, another defensive juggernaut. So the thing I'm most excited for, there's a reason I'm saying all this. So I'll stop slandering and I'll get to the point. The reason I'm excited about the Nets in the second half is because I want to see if they're going to be like that first team ever to just be able to outscore a team in the playoffs and win a championship that way. Because it's never been done if you really think about it. The closest thing is like the Phoenix Suns of like the mid 2000s with Steve Nash as the head of the snake, right? And now he's the head coach of this Brooklyn Nets team. So I'm so eager to see if like this team can just outscore a team and just be able to win that way. Because right now the Nets have a defensive rating. They're ranked 25th in defensive rating. That's not going to cut it, I don't believe. But back to my previous statement, I want to see if they can just, with Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, if they're just able to outscore a team and between the two, or between the three of them, put up 85 to 90 points in a playoff game, not counting, Joe Harris, what Blake Griffin can do. Maybe Karis LeVert will come off the bench and give you a game. You never know. I'm just so curious to see if this team is going to change that narrative that says, yes, we can be a middle of the pack defense and still win a championship by just outscoring people. So I'm very curious to continue to see the Nets develop, how they incorporate Blake Griffin, and how this team connects and does come playoff time. So that being said, I'm going to get to my last topic here before I close this thing out. And that's Chris Bosh slander. I mean, I've been scrolling through my Twitter, and I've been seeing like, who would you rather have going forward, or as a piece or whatever nonsense, Chris Bosh or Julius Randle? To me, this is utter disrespect to Chris Bosh. Like, and this is no disrespect to Julius Randle. Julius Randle has developed into a terrific player. He was an all-star this year. In the skills challenge this year, I mean, he's had a magnificent year. Like, he's developed into an all-star. So this is in no way, shape, or form to disrespect Julius Randle. But we're talking about a Hall of Famer here and Chris Bosh. Say whatever you want about the guy. His career was cut short. He didn't have as many oh my God plays with Miami. But let's backtrack a little here. When Chris Bosh was in Toronto, multiple-time All-Star, a 20-10 guy almost every night, you can say that his defense was shaky because you're right. His defense was shaky. He gets to Miami, and on countless occasions, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James have said, Chris Bosh was that missing puzzle piece we needed to win championships. It wasn't until they started to incorporate Chris Bosh into that offense in year 2 did Miami really take that next step. And we're talking about modern day centers. Chris Bosh completely fits the modern day center position for me. You have a 6'10", 6'11" guy, whatever his height is, just a long, lengthy guy that can spread the floor for you, can shoot threes. He can even guard multiple positions, which he improved dramatically when coming to Miami from Toronto. And no ego. Right? I mean, he was the guy that said from the get-go, like, okay, like, I need to check myself at the door and understand that I'm not the guy anymore. And I honestly believe that because of Chris Bosh's personality, that the Heat were able to win those championships, because they weren't getting it done without Chris Bosh. So, and this is no disrespect to Julius Randle, like I said. I think Julius Randle is a great player, but he's no Chris Bosh. I'm sorry. I mean, you can say that Julius Randle maybe he's more athletic, or he has more explosiveness and he can handle the ball a little better. Okay. You probably got me there comparing the two, but I'm sorry. I'm taking Chris Bosh probably 10 out of 10 times over Julius Randle. Like I said, no disrespect, but Chris Bosh, the slander, is got to go. I love Chris Bosh. Great player, Hall of Famer, multiple time champion. He's going to have his jersey retired, hopefully for both franchises. And I think that's end of story for me on that slander. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this episode today. If you liked this episode or if you disagreed or agreed with anything I said, definitely drop a comment down below. Hit my Twitter. I'm going to drop the link down below as well. And I'm also going to have my Twitter at the end of this episode. Thanks for watching, guys.